If only we lived in a world where I didn't have to say something as obvious as this. Shooting someone for their politics is wrong. It should go without saying. And I think for most people, it still does. I choose to believe that, because if it weren't true, the world around us would look very different. But here we are. The Charlie Kirk shooting, the shootings in Minnesota, and what's worse is how quickly the conversation around these tragedies gets twisted. Instead of focusing on the lives lost, the family shattered, and how we can stop the next act of violence, the conversation shifts. Public figures in the media rush to point fingers. This is the left's fault. This is the right's fault. Human tragedy becomes political ammunition, and that blame game doesn't just divide us. It feeds the very cycle of hostility that fuels violence in the first place. So let's step back for a moment. Imagine every belief we hold is a dot. Blue for left-leaning, red for right-leaning, green for neutral, meaning no strong opinion either way. And then there are the black and white dots. They're not political opinions at all, they're just things we think are right or wrong. Put all those dots in a box, and you've got a picture of a person's values. If you were to look at my box, I imagine it would be mostly blue, with some red, some green, and a handful of black and white. Now imagine I need to pick someone to be on my team. I don't really know what this team is in this scenario, but let's just say it's somebody who I'm going to have to spend most of the rest of my life with for whatever reason. The first person's box is mostly red, unlike mine, and obviously they still have some blue, some green, and black and white. The second person's box looks almost identical to mine, maybe even more blue than mine. On paper, you'd assume I'd choose that second person. But here's the problem. Those dots actually mean something. They aren't just colors. They represent beliefs with real-world consequences. And what if one of those black and white dots represents this? It is okay to murder someone for their politics. If the person with the box that's mostly blue has that in a white dot, meaning it's acceptable, while the mostly red person has that dot in black, meaning they think it's wrong, then suddenly, to me, all those other dots don't matter as much. That one dot outweighs the rest. So if I'm being true to my values, I choose that first person, even if we argue about everything else, because at the end of the day, we both reject violence. And yes, you might say that people sometimes set aside what should be core values for political gain, but I think if you can really set aside something you call a core value, maybe it was never truly core to begin with. And sure, some of us might carry more black and white values than others, but that's part of what makes each of us different. But when it comes to violence, for me, that one dot has to be black. Plenty of issues are gray. This is a very simple example, I understand that. It's simply to illustrate a point. But some really are black and white. And I think if you stop anyone on the street and ask, is it okay to murder someone for their politics? 99% of the time in our society, the answer is going to be no. So just to finish off this illustration of my point, maybe instead of a box of dots, we should think of our values more like a dartboard. At the center, the bullseye, are the non-negotiables, the values that define who we are at the deepest level. Around that are the middle rings, the issues where we lean left or right, where we argue, compromise, and campaign. And on the most outer rings are our lighter opinions and preferences that don't really weigh as heavily on us. We can disagree on the outer rings. We can even clash on the middle ones. That's politics, that's democracy. But if we don't agree on the center, if we both don't see violence as wrong, then no matter who I'm talking to, we're really not on the same team. And that's the point of this channel. On the political side of what I do here, I keep coming back to those democratic values that I think should transcend tribalism. Because let's be clear, my belief that trans people should have rights in a free and pluralistic society doesn't equal violence. Your belief in religious liberty doesn't equal violence. The right to criticize the government doesn't equal violence. This isn't left versus right. This is violent versus non-violent. When political violence becomes just another talking point, we all lose. Because it means we've forgotten the weight of that centering, the few values that should matter more than the rest. We can debate blue dots and red dots forever. That's democracy, and I personally love it. But if we stop agreeing on the black and white values at the center, then democracy itself doesn't survive.